Good evening. My name is Rita Hicks, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Houston Education Fund, I'd like to welcome you to Conversations with the Candidates. Tonight, we're going to be talking to a number of different candidates over the next 90 minutes, all of whom are seeking positions on the Houston ISD Board of Trustees. All candidates for each of these positions have been invited to participate tonight, and the candidates that you see as part of our program are the ones who took us up on our invitation. Don't forget that in addition to these candidate conversations, which you can watch live and then watch later on the Houston Media Source YouTube channel, we will also be publishing a League of Women Voters voter guide for this particular group of elections. You can find that online at vote411.org, where you can search by zip code for the races that affect you. And also don't forget that we have our voter registration deadline coming up in just a couple of weeks. So if you haven't had the chance to register to vote, be sure to do so ASAP. We are not going to go entirely in order tonight because we have a couple of different positions where candidates are arriving a little bit later. So we're going to actually start the top of our hour with candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 7. I'd like to thank Ms. Ann Sung for joining us.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time out to educate voters. So to begin with, can you just tell us briefly a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a graduate of HISD schools, went to Askew, T.H. Rogers, Bel Air High School. I had an amazing educational experience, went on to study physics and later public policy at Harvard University. I taught here in Houston, was Teacher of the Year at Lee High School, now Wisdom High School. And I now work at an education nonprofit called Project Grad Houston, where we partner with students and families and universities and employers to make sure that students are ready for college and for success beyond college. I was elected a year ago to the HISD Board of Education and have served since January in that role.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about what you think uniquely qualifies you for this role?
I bring my training in math, science, and public policy. My degrees from Harvard University in those subjects. I also bring a long history of working in the Houston area. I've been a teacher working in schools in Houston ISD, was the science department chair at a school that needed to make large improvements in science and did under my leadership. And as Chief Strategy Officer at Project Grad Houston, I worked very closely with a number of school districts, with universities, with corporations to help students understand what are the opportunities waiting for you in the work world and what's the preparation that you're going to need to get ready for that. While the academic skills you're going to need to develop as a young person, the soft skills you're going to need to develop, and then what are the educational pathways that get you there. And what that means is that I understand the destination that we're aiming for, that employers are looking for in the Houston region. I understand the challenges that our students face, and I also understand a lot of the best practices, the strategies, the partnerships that can be used to support our students to be successful.
Right. So in my experience, citizens who decide to run for school board do so because they have very particular passion points that they would like to see addressed by our schools. So if you were selected for District 7 trustee, what do you think would be your sort of top 3 priority items that you'd like to see HISD address during your term?
Well, since I was elected last year, I've been working on my top 3 priorities. So one is, I've noticed when I talk to students that graduate from HISD and go to college that many times they're not ready. They get to college and they say things like, in high school, the answers were given to me. A lot of times we were preparing for multiple choice tests and all you had to do was pick, is it A, B, C, or D? But I get to college and I'm asked to produce. I have to come up with an idea. I have to work on a project. And students don't feel prepared for that. So I'm a big proponent of HISD's Global Graduate Standard. And what the board has done this year on the policy committee that I serve on is to make sure that we actually not just have banners that say Global Graduate Standard and students are going to be critical thinkers and skilled communicators and leaders and adaptable and productive, but that we actually think about what does it mean in the classroom? What does it mean from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade to be developing those skills and opportunities for our students? So we do more than just teach kids to take multiple choice tests. So raising standards of education is the first thing that I care about. A second thing that I believe we need to do is be very thoughtful and strategic about the partnerships we build at each of our schools. Our students in HISD, almost 80% come from economically disadvantaged households. 30% are English language learners from all over the world. And for our kids in our schools today to become the leaders of Houston in the future, we need to be giving them some extra support so that they're not coming to school hungry, without eyeglasses that allow them to see the board. There are some partnerships that we can build with nonprofits, with businesses in the area to make sure that our kids are supported and can come to school ready to learn, and so that the teachers and all the students in every classroom can be focused on learning instead of the things at home that might be distracting a child. The third thing that's really important to me, in order to make the first two happen, in order to raise those standards and give students the supports they need, is that we be really good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And HISD, unfortunately, hasn't always had a good reputation for that. When I came to the board, we had a bond that was over budget and behind schedule. And we'd had a trustee, unfortunately, that was convicted of using his position to get contracts for friends, and that's not how we should be operating the 7th largest school district in the country. So the final thing is responsible stewardship of taxpayer dollars, making sure that we're honest and ethical and efficient with our spending so that we can focus on our priorities for kids.
Great. Well, and these are something like lightning talks because we just have so many candidates to talk about. So I want to take the next 2 minutes that you have remaining and let you say whatever you'd like to. If there was sort of an elevator pitch you'd like for voters to take with them to the polls about you, what would you want that to be?
This is a really critical time for Houston ISD right now. We have the task of providing a world-class education to students so that Houston continue to be a world-class city. And we have so many assets in the city to draw upon. We have the medical center, we have the ports, we have NASA, we have the energy industry here. And they are desperate to have a really high-quality education system that produces students who can be leaders in their fields. But we also are working with a very tight budget right now because of recapture, because the state hasn't reformed its school finance system yet this year. It means that we have to operate very efficiently with our resources. And the final thing is that the state's eyes are upon us right now with House Bill 1842. The state is looking to see, can we educate not just the 90% of students in the 90% of HISD schools that are meeting standard, but can we make sure that those 10% of schools that are still struggling are improving? We've made a lot of progress. We've had some 50 schools come out of IR in the last few years, but there's another critical 10 schools this year that must improve drastically. I have the experience, I've worked in those schools before, I've helped them succeed, and I've been a leader on this board, working on the governance, the standards, and the structures and processes that we need for this district to be successful. It's been my honor to serve as a trustee this last year. I'm running for a full 4-year term because I believe in this school district, and I ask for your vote this fall. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us. Ann Sung, candidate for District 7. Just stay in your seats. We'll be right back with the next candidate.
Thank you.
Okay. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates for HISD Board of Trustees. Next up is candidate Robert Lundeen, who is running for District 7 for the HISD Board of Trustees. 6, excuse me.
No worries.
District 6. We just heard from District 7.
Yeah, Ansung and John Lumu would kill me if they knew they had another player in the mix.
Fair, that's fair. So District 6, Mr. Lundeen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Rita.
Absolutely. So can you just take a few seconds here and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I have devoted the last 18 years of my life to improving educational outcomes for kids in Houston and beyond. I started my career after graduating from Rice University as a bilingual 5th grade teacher in HISD up on the north side of town. Went on to teach on the elementary, middle, and high school level and fell in love with the impact that one can make not only in directly working with kids one-on-one, but in using a classroom and as a school as a platform for mobilizing change in a community. Went on to found and lead my own school from scratch, one of the original Yes Prep Public Schools campuses in Southwest Houston. Had the chance to actually run an educational nonprofit abroad in the United Kingdom, and then came back and became a university professor, first at the University of St. Thomas and then at Rice. And then for the last 4 years have worked for HISD, overseeing 39 schools across the city, and in particular focusing on transforming our schools that have historically struggled, but where we see untapped potential. And I've been really proud of my record in leading 6 of our campuses out of improvement required status and keeping those schools out, not through shuffling deck chairs and not through sleight of hand, but by building capacity and clarity within teams and getting students and families and teachers and principals and communities aligned on what it's going to take to move outcomes forward on behalf of their kids.
Great. So you've told us a little bit about yourself, but this next question is a bit more nuanced. Because Can you tell us what you think are your qualifications that uniquely qualify you for this particular position?
Sure. So I got into this in large part because of the path that brought me here. I loved what I was doing working with schools across the city. It was the best job I ever had. But I increasingly saw that the lack of clarity and confusion going on at HISD headquarters was affecting the ability of my principals and my teachers to know that they had a sense of direction. And so I decided we needed to bring some leadership onto the board that had a couple of qualities that would hopefully guide the future success of the district. One is somebody who's actively been involved in transforming outcomes for kids within this city, both as a teacher and as a campus leader, and as somebody who has empowered campus leaders. Second is somebody who brings an understanding both of what makes HISD work and where its challenges can be, as well as what educational innovation can occur outside of the city of Houston and who's made it happen there. And third, who is unafraid to push the right questions at the board table. I always use the phrase constructive conflict. We got plenty of conflict going on at our board meetings right now, but I don't think it's constructive enough. And I don't think it's anchored enough in kids. Rather, it's on the ideologies of adults. And what anybody who's ever worked with me will tell you is my North Star is bringing back any dialogue about what we should be doing in schools to what truly matters for kids. And I think we need somebody who is an unapologetic spokesperson for that viewpoint on the board.
Great, thank you. So everyone comes to school board with passion points, and you've already been speaking with some of yours. My question is, what would you consider to be your sort of top 3 priority items if elected to this position? What would you like to see accomplished during your term?
Sure. So the first is tackling the issue of our historically underperforming campuses. The district has acknowledged the fact that we have a lot of schools that are that have been struggling for a long time, but it's not necessarily clear that the strategy we've put into place is going to be pushed hard enough to guide us to the results we need to get to. And there's too many kids that are stuck in the crossfire for us waiting to figure that out. The second is that we need to gain back the confidence of families in this community and in the city. For a long time, we've been the exception among big cities, where we're not a place where folks have thrown up their hands and said, I'm giving up on the school system, where rich or poor, white, African American, Hispanic, whatever language is spoken, people have stayed invested and engaged in our schools, and we need to keep that up. And third, we need to show thoughtful governance. We need to be showing that we're not only capable of leading ourselves, but that we're going to be conducting ourselves at the board table in a thoughtful and strategic way, thinking ahead not just to next month or next year, but 10 years down the line. The future of this city is the future of HISD.
Great. Thank you. Well, Mr. Lundin, we have about 90 seconds left with you. And in those 90 seconds, I would like to give you the floor to say to voters headed to the polls anything you might like them to remember about you when they cast their vote.
Thanks, Rita. Thank you for having all of us here. In my opinion, I've lived here 21 years. This is probably the most important school board election we've seen in the 2 decades since I've arrived here. We're $100 million in debt. We're facing potential takeover by the state, and we're rapidly losing the confidence of the folks that we need most. And so we're going to need somebody at that board table who not only brings demonstrated expertise in making things happen for kids in schools, but who is also unafraid to ask the direct questions and to bring us back to what truly matters in transforming outcomes for kids. I've demonstrated throughout my career that I can make those results happen for kids without being held back based on fear or trepidation. And I think we need that now more than ever. We're at a critical point, and I hope that I can serve not only District 6, but this entire city at this crucial time.
Mr. Lundin, I'd love to thank you for joining us tonight. You've just heard from Robert Lundin, candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 6. Just stay where you are. We'll be right back with the next candidate.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Conversations at the Candidates. We are fast and furious tonight. I'd like to welcome our next guest, who is a candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 5, Ms. Sue Schaefer. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
If you would mind, just take a minute and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I spent an amazing 27-year career in HISD as a classroom teacher and then as a librarian. So for 27 years, I was the beneficiary of all of the policies that were handed down by the Board of Trustees. When I retired in 2015, I decided to take a closer look at that because I felt like sometimes the policies were arbitrary, they didn't always make sense, and we were scrambling as teachers to try to comply. So that's why I'm running for the school board.
Right. So can you tell us just a little bit more about what you believe uniquely qualifies you to serve on the HISD Board of Trustees?
I think as an educator, I'm glad you asked this question. There are people who don't think you need an education background to serve on the Board of Trustees. And I think as an educator, you're uniquely qualified because you've been right in this specific situation. You've been in this atmosphere. You know what the policies have been in the past. You know which ones have worked. You know how to advocate for families in this district. And so it makes sense to have somebody who's been right there working with our children to actually be responsible for the policies that will affect them.
Right. So, Ms. Schaefer, everybody comes to school board with their passion points. And so what I would like for you to do is tell us if you had, say, a top 3 things that you would like to see HISD Board of Trustees address during your term, what would they be?
Number 1 would be low-performing schools. The Board of Education just came back to HISD and said that we need to get ourselves together. We need to fix our chronically failing schools, and we need to do it within this year, or they'll come in and they'll either close those schools, which I think is criminal, or they will take over the Board of Education. As an educator, I've asked myself, why would we have chronically low performing schools for 5 years or 6 years or 7 years? So my first passion point is low performing schools. Second, we need to adequately fund special education. There's no reason that parents should have to fight year after year after year for the services that their children qualify for. And special education has been pushed to the side, and I just feel like we spend so much money on litigation. We could be spending that money on the services that the kids deserve. The third would be, we know we're going to have to take a closer look at our magnet schools. The funding is disproportionate, but I was an educator. I was a librarian at a music magnet school, and the programs that are offered by our magnet schools are unbelievable. They're unparalleled by any other in this country. And so I think as we look at that funding, we have to make sure that we don't destroy great programs to make it more equitable, that we need to find a way to replicate these programs and put those amazing programs in some of our underperforming, underserved schools.
Great. Well, I actually only have one more question for you, Ms. Schaefer, and it's really throwing the floor open to you. So if there was some elevator pitch that you would like for the voters to take with them to the polls about you, what is it that you'd like for them to remember about you as a candidate?
I'd like them to remember that as I've gone through this process for the last 8 months, I've heard what people have said. And when you're on the campaign trail, people are very clear about what they want. And it's pretty simple. Children want to love going to school again. Teachers want to stop giving practice tests long enough that they can teach that amazing lesson that they found on Pinterest at 2 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And parents want their children to come home babbling about that amazing lesson that their teacher found on Pinterest at 2 in the morning, not about how much test-taking practice they took. And I think our taxpayers and business people want for us to produce critical thinking, information literate, and productive citizens. And it's pretty simple. I want to be a trustee who's able to deliver on that.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Schaefer. We've been speaking with Sue Schaefer, candidate for HISD Board of Trustees, District 5. Stay where you are. We'll be back with the next candidate in just a minute. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates. We're now going to be speaking to Mr. Rodolfo Reyes, who is candidate for HISD Board of Trustees, District 3. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for having me.
Can you please take a moment and just tell the viewers at home a little about yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. I was born in McAllen and raised in San Antonio, so I'm a native Texan. Went to public schools in San Antonio and graduated from St. Mary's University. Received a BA degree in Latin American history and Spanish. And thereafter, I ended up in Washington, D.C. for the next 14 years, working for the prestigious National Cancer Institute. Thereafter, I went to work for the Food and Drug Administration and NOAA. Then after that, I resigned from federal service, went to work for IBM federal systems. And then after that, I created my consulting company, Contract Strategies. And for the next 15 years, I was doing the international consulting scene. And here I am.
Can you tell us what is it that you believe uniquely qualifies you to serve as a member of the Board of Trustees?
I have some very unique skill sets. First of all, 35 years of contract negotiation experience. Out of those 35, 15 have been in the international arena. And in addition to that skill, I also have 35 years of accounting, management, budgeting, experience that I intend to use very, very well when I hit the ground running, reviewing the issues such as the recap and the FEMA situation and the takeover and the budget process that's forthcoming. In addition to many of the construction projects that are ongoing at HISD. In addition to that, though, I'm also a school teacher and a school substitute. I'm entering my 4th year, and I'm also a child advocate. I volunteer as a child advocate representing children who have been sexually and physically abused. I also sit on 2 boards on the Gulf Coast Community Services, and I'm also a board director on the Gulf Gate TERS number 8. In addition to all of that, I have also experienced as a city council member 3 years, so I know a little bit about governance.
Great, thank you. So, and everyone who runs for school board is doing so because they have some passion points.
Absolutely.
What I would like for you to tell us is, if you were elected during your term, what would your top 3 sort of big ticket items that you would like to see HISD work on be?
Equity across the board, reallocating fairly the funds to all the schools so that every child can get or can receive the same type of education and all the schools can afford to be able to get what they need. That's number 1. The second will be the budget. As you know, we have a windfall of $106 million that we need to make up, and somewhere we're going to have to find those additional monies. And I'm going to be really focusing on that because last year when the budget was passed, there was so much wastefulness and it really wasn't really focused upon. So that's one of the areas that I'm going to be looking at. And of course, the third one is the FEMA claim. Which is a gigantic claim that we need to receive monies in order to be able to fix all of our buildings and schools and things of that nature.
Great. Well, Mr. Reyes, the last question of the evening is really kind of throwing it open to you. So all of our voters are going to go to the polls. They're going to be looking at the various candidates. What would you like them to remember about you when they're casting their vote?
I want them to remember this, and I'm going to start out this way. I highly respect people that work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. I used to do it myself. You know, I used to work even 7 days a week. And these people's allegiance is to their employer, and rightfully so, because that's their bread and butter. They have to support a family. Their commitment is to their bosses. But at the end of the day, when each and every one of those people have worked 8, 9, 10 hours a day, well, by the time they leave, the school district offices are closed, the schools are out, the children are out. So my question is, where is their commitment to the schools and to the children? I, on the other hand, I can get out of bed in the mornings, get a cup of coffee, and read the newspaper, watch the news, and kiss my wife goodbye, and I'll head out to the district office where I'll be working on the recap, working on the budget, working on anything that needs to be done. If a principal in my area, out of the 30 schools that I have, give me a call, say, hey, Rudy, I need to talk to you, I'll go over and talk to him, okay? I'm going to give the district, the children, and the education 150% commitment, okay? And I think that's the difference between me and my opponents, is that I understand what it's going to take to do this job. I have been a city council member before. I know what governance is. I know what it takes to do this job. And I have the skills also to do it.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You've just been hearing from Rodolfo Reyes, candidate for HISD Board of Trustees, District 3. Stay where you are, but we'll be right back with the next candidate. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates. Our next candidate to speak with is candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 3, Carlos Parrott. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Would you please just take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. So as you just mentioned, my name's Carlos Parrott. I am a product of HISD. And so I attended Rutgers, Stevenson, and Chavez High School. I was part of the Emerge Fellowship. I graduated in 2014 and went on to Pitzer College in Claremont, California. I have committed myself to this district since 2010 when I co-founded the group called Chavez JSA. I've worked with students extensively, encouraging, actually providing them a platform to get involved in local politics. I have worked as a senior operations assistant at my college, improving college access for students not only at the Claremont colleges, but really across the nation. And so I am now running for the board, partially because I believe that there's a need for young and innovative leadership.
Great, thank you. So can you, this is a little bit of a different question, but can you tell us a little bit about what you believe uniquely qualifies you for Board of Trustees?
Of course, this is a great question. I think oftentimes we talk about the need for educational experience, the need to have been in the classroom, the need to have been an administrator. And while I laud those efforts and believe that that's correct, I think that for too long, people wanting to represent students in District 3 and across HISD have claimed to have this experience, yet we haven't seen concrete change. And so I think something that uniquely qualifies me is being a recent HISD graduate, someone that has really lived through the experiences that most teachers and students are experiencing in the classroom today. In addition, I think my commitment to the community is something that most of the other candidates don't have. I've been out there with students. It's something that I've done even as I've been in college. And so I think that that's what makes me a unique candidate, being young and ready for innovative change on the school board.
Right. So everyone who runs for school board does so because it's a passion point for them. So my next question is, if you're elected, what would you say are your sort of top 3 priority items that you would like to see the school district address in your term?
Yeah, that's a great question. So number 1 is college and career readiness. HISD has fixated its resources on sending every student to college, and I think that's a great effort. However, we haven't seen that be a success. I think we need to bring back CTE programs. I think we need to provide our students vocational training opportunities, 2-year college opportunities, and 4-year college opportunities. I think that if we're trying to create a society that can really contribute back to their communities, we must first invest in the kind of future that students are looking for, not one that we want to impose on them. That's number 1. Number 2, our school district currently faces a large deficit, over $100 million. This deficit impacts our schools negatively. We are also dealing with disproportionate funding. And so for me, number 2 is equitable solutions to funds in HISD. And number 3, start testing. I think our students are excessively tested. The board needs to take a stand against the state of Texas, who demands that we test our students yet doesn't provide any state funds for our schools. I think that our first step can be removing standardized testing and grade levels not required by the state.
Right. Well, I have one more question for you, and it's really kind of throwing the floor back open to you, Carlos. All of our voters are going to head to the polls, and obviously they have a lot of candidates to choose from for these various positions. What would you like for them to remember about you when they're casting their vote?
I think what I'd want voters to remember about me is that I have no other invested interest but the students. I am coming into this board with no influence on behalf of anyone else. I am running simply because I want to advocate for students, because there is a need for a student voice on the board. We need to bring back the student voice. We need to put students back at the forefront of policymaking in HISD. And I believe to be the only candidate in District 3 that can do that. And so as voters are coming out to vote in the November 7th election, both early voting and on election day, I want you to remember that despite me being 21, I think I bring the leadership that is much needed on our school board. So that's what I would encourage voters to remember.
Thank you so much for joining us. You've just been hearing from Carlos Perret, candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 3. Stay where you are. We'll be back with the next candidate in a second. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates. Next up is the final candidate for HISD Board of Trustees, District 3, Mr. Jesse Rodriguez. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. If you would please just take a moment and tell the viewers at home a little about yourself.
Well, I'm born and raised in Houston, Texas. I attended all HISD schools. 4 of my children attended all HISD schools, and I have a granddaughter in an HISD school right now, so I definitely have a vested interest. I've been serving the community for over 30 years. I've sit on 7 boards, including this one here, the Houston Media Source. I'm on their treasurer on their board here, appointed by Mayor Niece Parker. I also work with the Denver Harbor Senior Citizens. I work with the Texas Hispanic Seniors Organization. I work with I'm an advocate for the Knights of Columbus. And let's see, some more. I'm the president of my civic club, which is the Pine Valley Civic Club, which is in my district, District 3. And many more organizations that I definitely work with. So I have a proven track record of service in the community. And I've lived in the district for over 43 years, even though I've been living in Houston 63 years. So I'm definitely qualified and attended the University of Houston. I have my background in health and physical education, and I've been an avid participant and member of the PTOs. I've been volunteered my times for the fall festivals at many of the elementary schools, and I've been a chaperone for some of the middle school graduations. So, I have an interest, I have an involvement, I have a career, a great track record of being involved with HISD.
Great. So can you talk to us about what you believe are the unique qualifications that you bring to the position?
Well, number one is, again, like I said, my board experience. And that when you sit on 7 boards, then you learn how a board operates. And I think that's what's most important about HISD is we have to have a great boards make great schools. So we definitely have to make a great thing. And what makes me uniquely qualified is the fact that I'm born and raised in Houston. And again, like I mentioned, that I went to HISD schools. My children went to HISD schools. And I have a vested interest with my granddaughter attending HISD school. So I care. I definitely have a passion for what goes on at the schools. And then I've also been part of a NHPO leadership training. I've done some leadership training. I learned about leadership styles, risk-taking, public speaking, how to speak to the media, how to conduct a meeting, Robert's Rules of Order, risk-taking, team building. These are some of the things that I've been trained for, so I'm ready to hit the ground running when it comes down to the HISD board.
Great. So you've already mentioned that passion is what brings you to the HISD board. That tends to be what attracts people to school board positions. So my question for you is, if you were elected during your term on HISD board, what are the top 3 things that you would like to see HISD address?
Well, I think the first thing is to help Superintendent Carranza implement his Achieve 180 plan. Because you're not hearing anybody. Everybody says, I can do this, I can do that, I will do this. No, we need to work as a team. And the board needs to work as a team. He's got a plan already implemented. We don't need any other plans, any other ideas. Let us focus on the plan. Let us complete the plan. Let us get the plan going so we can, save ourselves from, TEA takeover. So we can have some improvements in our schools. Let's support the plan in place. So, and then in regards to the other 2 things, I would definitely like to see bring the board together, because we're not going to achieve anything. We can't be a Superman, we can't be a Lone Ranger on the board. We have to work as a team. So that my second thing was to bring the board together to work together. And so that way we can be one unit and move forward as a board. And number 3 is, of course, to try to bring us to bring our budget to a point where we're not in a deficit. Bring new ideas. Like one idea I have, many I have, is let's start marketing, putting signs on our buses. Let's make some money. HISD doesn't make any money. So let's see about ways of bringing in money and not having to always depend on the state. If we can bring in money different ways, through foundations, through grants, through advertising on buses, so let's do it.
Thank you. So I only have one more question for you, Mr. Rodriguez, and it's actually kind of throwing the floor open for you. So our voters are going to go to the polls. They obviously have a lot of races that they're going to be voting, and several candidates for this particular position. So what would you like for voters to remember about you when they're casting their ballot?
Well, I guess number 1, like I said, is that I'm from the neighborhood. I believe in the neighborhood. I want the quality of life to be better in the neighborhood. I think one point that somebody made a point of is that we need to keep our schools, keep the quality of our education up, because we don't want our families moving out of the neighborhood. We want them to stay in the neighborhood. We want our children, our families, and going to Pearland and Katy and the Woodlands and Kingwood. We want to keep our families in the neighborhoods they were brought up with. So in order for that to happen, we have to have quality schools so they can have schools that they're proud to send their children to. The other thing is, the fact of the matter is that I've been working in the community. I already have a track record where the other candidates do not have a track record. They have not done anything in our community. I've been working in the community for many years, and I've coached teams. I've worked with teams of Little League basketball, soccer, and I'm very proud that a lot of these children that I've worked with have grown up to be good citizens. So, and then the last thing is, I'll tell everybody, I've been on the radio, I've made things happen. The story I love to tell is that I was on the radio, and we were at on Kakuuka, and a parent called us from Milby High School, and she said, Boogeyman Jumpin' Jets, we were called the Chorizo Crew then. She said, we had 2 people come into our PTO meeting. Can you help us? So we announced that for 2 weeks straight about the meeting and the importance of parents getting involved with their students, getting involved with their children, getting involved with the parents, getting involved with the principal, knowing what's going on. And after mentioning that for 2 weeks, the lady called us after the meeting, and she says, thank you very much for what you did. We had 92 parents show up to our PTO meeting. And these are the things that I plan to do, the alternative, the creative things, to bring them to the table, and which I can do. And I'll close with this, as we always close. Also, I was forgot to tell you, I was I got an HEC honorary degree for my contribution to education and community last year. And I was asked to speak in front of the graduates. And what I told the graduates is, the family that prays together stays together. If you want to lead, you have to know how to read. Be cool, stay in school. Don't be a tonto, graduate pronto. If you can get high on nature. We didn't cross the border, the border crossed us. Y que siga la onda, which means to go forth. So that's pretty much my story.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You've been hearing from Mr. Jesse Rodriguez, candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 3. Stay where you are. We'll be back with the next candidate in just a minute. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates. Next up in our group of candidates is one of the candidates for HISD Board of Trustees District 1, Ms. Elizabeth Santos. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Could you please just take a few minutes and tell us a little about yourself?
Well, my name is Elizabeth Santos. I was born and raised in Houston. I graduated from all District 1 schools, Herrera Elementary, Burbank Middle School, and Sam Houston High School. I've been with the district since 1986, first as a student, then as a volunteer, and now this is my 10th year teaching in the district.
Great. Can you tell us what you believe uniquely qualifies you to serve on HISD Board of Trustees?
There are a couple different reasons, but the one thing is that I sat in the very same seats our students sit in today, and this is my 10th year standing in front of them as a teacher. So I know the struggles that they face, and I know what works in the classroom. So for a long time, District 1, there are 32,653 students, and that number changes just a little bit because of Harvey and everything that's happened. And there are 18,555 students on the east side of 45. That's 57% of our students that have never had representation on the school board. So that's another, reason, including what my reason is.
Right. So people who come to school board tend to do it because they're passionate about kids. And what I'm curious about for my next question is, if you are elected to District 1, what do you think are your sort of top 3 priority items that you would like to see the board address during your term?
Oh, well, there are 3 things. We need to end the culture of high-stakes standardized testing. As a teacher, we are not educating our children. We are creating a culture of test takers. So, for example, last year, every 4 days we had a district snapshot, a snapshot where our students were being tested every 4 days to prepare for a larger test. Right now, the trustees are working, a goal for the superintendent is to only give 2 snapshots per semester. And that's insight that only, firsthand insight of what a teacher can give the school board. And that's something that we need, a perspective that we need on the school board. The second thing would be to hire and retain quality educators. We spend a lot of money training new teachers. Right now, 50% of our teachers have less than 5 years worth of teaching experience, and continuing to try to create professional development and hire new teachers, that costs a lot of money. We can work with what we have and develop our teachers and strengthen our education, public education now. And the third thing that really is a point of pride for myself is I'm the only candidate in this race not accepting money from HISD vendors or people seeking to do business with HISD. Too many times, trustees, although they might have interest in our students, are fighting to see who or where they're going to give their friends their contracts, and it takes away from what actually should be happening, and that's directing our superintendent, asking the right questions, direct the superintendent and the administration to better serve our children and prioritize our children. So.
Okay, thank you. So my 4th question, it's my last one, and it's really kind of opening the floor up for you. So when voters head to the polls and are making their choices between the candidates, what are the things that you would like for them to remember about you?
Well, I've been in education as a student, a volunteer, as a teacher. This campaign, it's not my campaign, it's our campaign. It's involving our students, former students, parents, teachers, community members. I was asked to run for this campaign, for this seat, and at first I was really hesitant because I'm not a politician, I'm a teacher. And that moral compass that I have, I feel will gauge us moving forward. Our students, I ask our students every day to challenge the status quo, to go have a voice, to go out there and be someone and be something. And they don't always get to vote, so they need a voice. And as a trustee, I will be that vote and that voice for them, who represents, these are our primary constituents. These are our students, and having them set as a priority at all times is what the school board needs right now.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You have been hearing from Elizabeth Santos, candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 1. Stay tuned. The next candidate's going to be right up. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates. Next up is another candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 1, Monica Reichart. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you take just a minute and tell us about yourself?
Sure. My name is Monica Flores Reichart. I'm a candidate for District 1. I'm an attorney, a mother of 3, and a longtime education advocate in the district. For the past 4 years, I have been studying and pushing policy changes at the school board level to improve our schools and strengthen them. I am from San Antonio. I went to Texas Public Schools in San Antonio. I went to a high school where not a lot of students graduated, much less got into college, much less graduated from college. But I was very fortunate. I had the opportunity to go to Princeton. I have an undergraduate degree from Princeton in public policy and a law degree from Columbia Law School. I have also done public policy in the area. I used to work for Congressman Nick Lamson, and I was his point person in District 22 for NASA policy and missing and exploited children policy. So I do have that policy aspect to my background as well.
Great. Thank you. Now, can you tell us what you believe are the unique qualifications that you bring that you think make you the best candidate for District 1?
Other than my policy background, I think that the fact that I have been working on a macro level in the district in front of the board to push policies to strengthen the board, I think makes me different. I have helped create and work with coalitions to bring policy changes to the district. For example, I was part of the coalition that helped push the suspension ban for students from pre-K through 2nd grade. That was a partnership with Texas Appleseed and One Houston and various other advocates. And I've done a lot of research and pushed for various other issues, including equity in the magnet program and equity in the GT program as well. So I know this board well. Another thing that I bring to the board is the parent perspective. We have 3 educators on the board, but we have only 2 board members that are potentially coming back next year that actually have students currently in HISD schools. My children have always attended HISD schools. They've always attended HISD schools with 90+% economically disadvantaged populations. So bringing that perspective to the board, I think, is unique and helpful.
Great. So I typically find that people running for school board are doing it because it's a passion point for them. Yes. So tell me, if you are elected, what do you think are your sort of top 3 priority items you would like to see the board address in your term?
I think number 1 and number 2 have to be the budget and the potential TEA takeover and pushing back against that. With regard to the budget, we have a $107 million deficit in our budget that we passed last year, our $2 billion budget. In our budget, only 57% of our budget goes to instruction. We need to have a very careful audit, and we need to go to zero-based budgeting for a few years for the budget. I really think not only to find cost savings, to make sure every penny we're spending is being spent effectively and efficiently, but also to bring some transparency and comfort to our community, because our community needs to have confidence that their district is spending money well. We don't want our community to have lots of conspiracy theories about where the money is going, and I think this would be do a good job at uncovering and making that budget transparent. The second one has to be improving our IR schools so that we can push back on the TEA takeover. That is critical. We are potentially losing our school board, our elected school board, to a board of managers who will not be elected. And that's just incredible to think about. So part of it is improving our IR schools. The third thing is really focusing on equity in the district. For example, 2 years ago, we had an expert come in from Vanderbilt University who said that our gifted and talented program was intentionally discriminatory with regard to African American students. And virtually nothing has happened to change that. We really need to elect people on the board that have those priorities in mind and are willing to have the difficult conversations, have the depth and breadth of knowledge of information and issues that have been in front of the board for the past 4 years that can really push the issues forward. Passion is wonderful, but that's not enough. It really is a matter of working with other board members as well to really push those issues forward and really make a positive change.
Great. So my last question for you is kind of throwing the floor open to you. So voters will head to the polls. They're going to be making choices between a number of candidates. What would you like for them to remember about you?
I think it's critical to have the parent perspective on the board, have children who are currently in the school district. Parents are the ones who know if their children, how their children are actually doing, and whether their children are enjoying school, especially our smallest children. I believe strongly that I can be an effective board member to bring lots of passion to the board, but at the same time, the ability to work with the board that we currently have, which has a lot of very strong voices. And it's important that every single voice is heard. I have a background in coalition building that I think is going to be critical to our school district going forward, and think I can really bring about the positive change that we need to really strengthen our school district.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. You have been hearing from Monica Reichart, candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 1. Stay tuned. We'll be back with the next candidate in just a moment. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates. Our next candidate to chat with is from HISD Board of Trustees race for District 9, Ms. Carla Brown. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So can you take just a few minutes and tell our viewers at home a little about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Carla Brown, and I am an educator. I have over 20 years of experience, most of it in HISD. I've been a teacher, I've been an assistant principal, I've been an instructional coordinator. I've spent all of my life from my parents' garage being a teacher. My sister and I used to teach the kids in the community. Teaching is what I'm all about. I let everybody know I am not a politician. I am an educator. I want to bring an educator's perspective to the board, and especially District 9. I am very concerned about some of the things in District 9, and I want to make a difference there. I'm a product of District 9. That's why it's so dear to my heart. I went to Reynolds Elementary, Woodson Middle School, and to Worthing High School. I am a graduate of those schools, and I see those schools failing now, and that's a concern of mine.
Thank you. Can you tell us what you think are the unique qualifications that you bring as a candidate for the board?
Well, I think, as I've already stated, the unique quality that I bring for District 9 and the other candidates, I am an educator. I know what goes on in the classrooms. I know what goes on a school campus. I want to make sure that decisions are being made that are in the best interest of those students, the best interest of those families that we are serving, that we are representing. I want to make sure that the families have a voice, something that they don't often have and don't often feel that they have. I want to make sure that that goes forward. And I believe being an educator, that gives me that unique perspective that everyone doesn't understand.
Great, thank you. So people run for school board because it's a passion, and they usually come with their own ideas about where the district should be headed next. So if you are elected to District 9, what do you think would be your sort of top 3 priority items during your term that you would like to see worked on by the district?
Well, I think the top 3 things, number 1 would be to deal with the failing schools. As I mentioned, in District 9, 14 of the 30 schools are failing. So I think that's a huge problem. I definitely want to be the one to be the catalyst for change on those campuses. I want to make sure that each school has what I would say is an IEP. We do that for special education students. I think each school, whether they're failing or not, they should have an IEP, individual education plan, even before the problem. I want us to be proactive instead of being always reactive. In the case of the 14 schools, unfortunately, we're having to react right now, and I want to make sure that that is addressed by bringing in the community to ensure that the needs of those families are being met. We have a situation where we deal with what the district calls wraparound services. I want to make sure that those wraparound services are in District 9 and specific to the campuses. I don't think that there's a blanket that you can put over the problem at each campus. Each one will have to be specific to that campus. Number 2, I would say I would like to deal with the budget. There are 2 things with the budget that I'm concerned about. One, of course, the deficit that the critical deficit that we have, and then the fact that I would like also to do an audit to make sure that we are spending the money the way we should spend the money, and that monies are going to where that the budget says they're going. I also want us to deal with what I call a personnel audit. I want to make sure that everybody who is in a position is doing what he or she is supposed to be doing. I want to make sure that they're doing enough for what they're being paid. So I definitely think there should be a personnel audit as well. So 2 different audits. And the third thing, of course, would be the high stakes testing. As an educator, classroom teacher, school administrator, I've seen what testing has done to the education of students, especially those students in low-income areas. Every day they're inundated with the importance of testing. And at the end of the day, even when we get them to pass the test, when we compare them to other students, we look at how our students are compared to other students in the country and even students in other countries. And it doesn't add up. The amount of time that we're spending on testing does not correlate with a good education. So I'm very concerned about those things, and I want to take some of that away because we need to get back to authentic teaching. And I believe that our students deserve that.
Great, thank you. So one last question for you, and it's really kind of throwing the floor open to you. So voters will head to the polls, and when they are choosing what candidate they'd like to vote for District 9, what do you want them to remember about you?
number one, I want them to remember that I'm number one on the ballot, and I'm Carla with the K. So please make sure that you vote for me. The other piece is I want them to understand why I believe it's so important to have an educator making decisions about education. I do it from a frame of reference, one that that comes from the fact that I've been in the classrooms. One that's I've walked the halls of the classrooms as an administrator. I understand some of the things that the teachers go through. I also understand some of the things that administrators have been asked to do from the powers that be. I want to make sure that people feel they have a voice. I want to make sure that where unions are concerned, that unions are really being used as unions should be used, to give the teachers, to give the personnel a voice in the district, because there are a lot of things that have been occurring in the district that should not have been occurring in the district, and it takes away from the education of children. When I think about a teacher going into a classroom, I see a teacher getting on stage and performing because they have to captivate that audience in order for that audience to learn. And we can't do that with distractions. And I want to make sure that those distractions are taken away and teachers can go back to authentic teaching.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You've been hearing from Ms. Carla Brown, District for HISD Board of Trustees, District 9. Stay tuned. We'll be back with the next candidate in just a moment. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates. The next candidate you will be hearing from is the candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 6, Holly Flynn Villaseco. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Absolutely. If you would please take just a moment and tell the viewers at home about yourself.
Sure. So my name's Holly Flynn Villaseca. I am the current sitting trustee for HISD District 6, which is representative of West and Southwest Houston. I've enjoyed being a trustee since being appointed by the Board of Education in January of this year, and I've been working tirelessly along with my colleagues to help HISD be as an effective school district as possible and making sure that we're putting students first in all that we do. I have a background in education. Not only is it my job as a trustee, but I've been working in education for 13 going on 14 years. I started as a classroom teacher in a bilingual and dual language setting in HISD, and with my experience as a teacher, even though I left the classroom 7 years ago, I'm still working in education. Once an educator, always an educator. I always bring that insight with me when I'm making policy decisions on behalf of almost 220,000 school students in HISD.
Thank you. So you've touched on this a little bit, but I want to ask a very fine-tuned question, and that is, tell us what you believe are the unique qualifications you bring to HISD Board of Trustees.
Sure. So as you already heard, I was an educator and a bilingual educator in South Houston. You know, it's really important to be able to say that you've been on the front lines working with students and working in a Title I school in South Houston too, since the majority of our schools and the students that we serve are in underserved communities. And so, like I said, being able to have been there, understanding what resources and really the grit that it takes to be able to be as effective and provide students with a very safe and joyful environment is very important to me. Also, because of my background history, I was the last one born of six kids and the first one to go to college. And public education for me has played a very important part of my success and my career. And so, I grew up in a rural town in Ohio. I'm the daughter of an immigrant from South America and a working class family. And so that says a lot about who I am. And I was fortunate to go to college at the University of Michigan for undergrad. And then I came here to teach. And I taught in bilingual settings. And it was a wonderful experience in my life. And outside of teaching, I've also supported teachers in the classroom, first and second year teachers in a coaching capacity. So I understand what good teaching and excellent teaching and helping cultivate some of the different qualities and characteristics in teachers since I've done that before. I also managed a portfolio of work with all major urban districts in Texas and Oklahoma at a national nonprofit organization. And so I was able to work with all large urbans, Austin ISD, Dallas ISD, Houston ISD, Lubbock, several school districts and Tulsa Public Schools on lots of different initiatives. And that was a nice, milestone in my career because I was able to sort of see how things got done in different districts and how they did it. And that inspired me to go back to graduate work for social organizational psychology. So I'm a social organizational psychologist, and also which helps me understand human behavior in the workplace and understanding group dynamics and decisions, which comes in very handy when working with a large-scale organization such as Houston Independent School District. We have almost 30,000 employees, and again, we're making very important decisions on behalf of 220,000 students.
Thank you. So, running again for HISD Board of Trustees sounds like a passion for you. So can you tell me if you're elected to another term, what would your top sort of 3 priority items you'd like to see the Board of Trustees address be?
Right. So again, like I said, we've been working tirelessly for the last, since I can speak from my experience coming onto the board since January, really working around implementing a governance framework. I'm the chair of the policy committee, and we're working around implementing a governance framework that helps us define our vision for the district, set goals for the superintendent, because we have 2 employees. We have the superintendent and an auditor, and we pretty much set the frame. We create the frame for him, and then he decides how he's going to do it, and we ask questions and we hold him accountable, right? And so we've been implementing different pieces around constraint progress measures, goals progress measures, and so we've been working collaboratively as a team to help define those so that we can be successful. And we're focusing on equity. That wasn't necessarily something super specific in previous years, and I'm very proud to have been a part of a decision-making body that's really making that a priority. It's the right thing to do for our students, and we're going to continue to work on that. So continuing to work through the framework and making sure that we're demonstrating that we're transparent and we're putting our students first above all, and making sure that HISD does become a choice district for all of our families. And everyone should be confident in sending their kid to either a choice school or a community school. So something that we need to continue to do is build out our community schools framework, which is written into our governance framework officially. And so we're very proud of that. We know that our students need to be safe and healthy and happy so that they can receive learning in the classroom, and making sure that we provide some wraparound services and being able to mobilize and work closely with the City of Houston and all of these other nonprofits and organizations that have a wealth of information and resources for our parents and families, and making those resources available at the school site, which is a community center point, and we need to make sure that that we continue to strengthen that. So frank governance, community schools framework, or meeting the child where they're at, the whole child. It's lingo, but that's what we call it. And then another thing would definitely be the budget and Harvey recovery. So I'll lump those together because Harvey recovery has budgetary implications. And we need to make sure that because we are paying into recapture, that we need to make sure that, not just from that, but we have a big budget. We need to make sure that we're finding efficiencies and we're spending our money wisely. And we have less to do it with given our recapture payment and given Harvey, right? So making sure that we're making, that we have a third party that will be sure to audit the adopted budget under these circumstances and look to other school districts that are paying in recapture, what they're doing so that we can make the most for our students and make sure the dollars are as close to the students as possible.
Right. So I have only one more question for you, and it's really kind of throwing the floor open for you. So when the voters go to the polls and they're choosing a candidate for District 6, what do you want them to remember about you?
So first of all, I'm a mother. He's not school aged, but he goes to a little school from 9 to 12. He's 21 months old. And I want everybody to remember that what I want for my son is what I would like for everybody, everybody's students or sons and daughters across the district. We want to make sure that we have confidence in sending our students to a safe, welcoming, warm environment that provides rigorous, personalized learning. And we want to make sure that parents feel confident in whether they choose their neighborhood school or a specialized program at one of our 118 choice schools across the district. HISD has lots of resources, lots of wonderful schools, lots of talented teachers and principals, and we want to make sure that that the families and the citizens of Houston really do see Houston and HISD in that light, right? So that's one thing. So remember that I'm a mom, that I want what's best for your kids as I would for my own. Another thing is that I'm experienced and that I've been on the front lines as an educator, and I've worked on a national scale, and I have a macro understanding of what goes on from a policy perspective, given the work that I've done on the board and given my professional experience aside. Again, I'm also proud to say that that I'm also I'm fully bilingual given that my background, right? And I'm able to connect with parents in the native Spanish-speaking community as it was my first language as well. And so that's really important. And I work hard, I work tirelessly, and I'm working to improve our schools and make sure that we're turning the corner and making sure that our schools and families feel empowered and that we uplift the schools that are in our most historically underserved communities.
Thank you so much for joining us. You've just been hearing from Holly Maria Flynn Villaseca, candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 6. Stay where you are. Next up, we have our final candidate for the night, and that will be Ms. Sue Dygard, HISD Board of Trustees District 5 candidate. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Conversations with the Candidates for HISD School Board of Trustees. Through the magic of technology, our final candidate of the evening is actually joining us via Skype, and that is candidate for District 5, Sue Dygard. Sue, can you hear me?
We can't hear. We can't hear her. We cannot hear her. She doesn't have a mic. There you go.
Hi, thank you for having me on tonight, and thank you for accommodating my schedule. Sorry I couldn't be in the studio with you.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we now can hear you loud and clear. So can you please just take a moment and tell our viewers at home a little about yourself?
Yes, I am the daughter of a high school dropout, and when I received my degrees from Rice University, I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. So I know firsthand the importance and difference a quality public education can make in a child's life. I now am the mother of 2 daughters who are enrolled in HISD schools. They have enriching programs, fantastic teachers, but in my advocacy in the district, I know that not all students have access to the same educational opportunities that my own children have. I've long believed that public education is a cornerstone of our society, our economy, and our democracy, and that has fueled my passion to be an advocate for public education for many years. I've been an informed and engaged advocate at both the state and the local levels, advocating for effective policies and funding for our local students. I currently serve on the board of the Houston Center for Literacy. I'm on the HISD District Advisory Committee. I also serve as the chair of the Communications Committee for an organization called Arts Access Initiative, which works to expand arts education opportunities to all students in HISD. I have been attending the District 5 leader meetings for many years now. I also have lived in District 5 for 30 years, so I'm very vested in the community here.
Thank you. So this is a little bit more nuanced question. You've already given us a little bit of your background, but can you tell us what you believe are the unique qualifications that you bring as a candidate for the Board of Trustees?
I'd say that the unique qualifications that I bring in my race are leadership and experience. I have been involved in advocacy for our students in HISD for nearly a decade now. I know where we're at. I know how we got here. More importantly, I have a vision of where we need to be going with our education system. I've lived here for 30 years. I'm vested in the community, as I said earlier. I also have leadership experience, which I think is going to be a critical skill moving forward in HISD. We have some serious issues confronting our district, and it is going to take people with experience working in collaborative, respectful ways to solve the challenges that we have.
Great. Thank you. So people who run for school board tend to do so because it's a passion point for them. And so my next question is, if you're elected to the Board of Trustees, what do you think are your sort of top 3 priority items you would like to see the Board of Trustees address during your term?
First and foremost, as many people know, we're at risk of being taken over as a district by the Texas Education Agency because some of our schools have been an improvement required for an excessive number of years. And so first and foremost, we need to maintain publicly elected control of our school board. That is something I hold very dear, is publicly elected governance of how we spend our public tax dollars. The other 2 major issues for me, one is the budget. I am the only candidate in this race who has been advocating for effective policies and funding at the state level. I understand the complexities and politics of school finance and have been following the budget for a long time. We can't do any of our work here in the district without a good, solid hand on our finances. The board this past summer passed a budget that took over $100 million out of our fund balance to pay for very necessary teacher raises so we could be competitive with surrounding school districts. However, that's not a sustainable budget, and I am fully supportive of a third-party performance audit of how we are spending our money to find efficiencies, to find innovative solutions to our challenges. And to continue to advocate with the state. I've testified on policies. I go every single session. I lead other parents and even students to do that work and to continue that fight for school finance reform with the state. My third priority issue, and this goes with just having a really strong, solid foundation for our district upon which to do our work, is prioritizing the recruitment, the support, the development, and the retention of high-quality teachers. We need to be offering competitive salaries and benefits for our teachers. We need to have a culture of respect, but we also have to have a solid plan that is known from the top to the bottom with our teachers, with our administrators, with our board members. What's our plan to get great teachers into our classrooms so every student has a great teacher every minute of every school day? What policies and practices do we have to support those teachers in their work, and then also to give them the necessary professional development to continue to learn and grow in their profession, and then most importantly, to retain our great teachers in our HISD classrooms. So those would be my top 3 priorities at the start of my terms of service as a board member.
Great, thank you. So I have one more question for you, and it's actually throwing the floor open for you. So our voters are going to head to the polls. They have multiple candidates to choose from. What do you want them to remember about you when they cast their ballot?
So I decided to jump into this race after being involved for quite some time. And as a volunteer, as an advocate, as a parent, it wasn't something that I just had not been involved in before. So my priority for me personally is to give my time and talent to the school district in this arena for the service of students and for the service of my community first and foremost. Two pivotal things happened right before my decision. One was I was at an educational forum and I told the leader of that event, I said 2035. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, well, that's the year that the babies born this year should be graduating from high school. But we're not doing anything fundamentally different today to change those outcomes for those students than we were doing 18 years ago. But somehow we're going to expect a different result. And I will work my hardest and prioritize every bit of my service to this district to changing those outcomes for our kids so that we are the model of what a 21st century urban school district can achieve for our students. We have the potential to achieve for our students in this city, and we're just not achieving it. The other pivotal thing that happened to me right before this decision was I was at NASA. And anybody who goes to NASA right now, every exhibit, they're talking about how they're actively planning to send humans to Mars by 2040. Do not tell me that we can send humans to another planet by 2040, but we cannot solve education here on Earth in our school district by 2035. I am fully and wholly committed, just as I have been through the years, to our students. This isn't a hobby for me. This is a commitment to the students, a commitment to the community, and I plan to follow through on that.
Great. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for tuning in even from far away. You've just been hearing from Sue Dygard, candidate for HISD Board of Trustees District 5. That concludes our candidates for this evening. It's been a wild and crazy evening, but I hope you found it educational. If you happen to have missed a portion of the segment, not to worry. You'll be able to find it on the Houston Media Source YouTube channel in just a couple days. I want to remind everyone that information about these races, as well as the ballot measures that are going to be on your ballot in November, can be found in our voters guide. You can access it online at vote411.org. And also don't forget, the deadline to register to vote this November is coming up in just a couple of weeks. So if you had not taken the opportunity yet to go register and vote, do so ASAP. On behalf of the League of the Women Voters of Houston Education Fund, I'm Rita Hicks. Thank you so much for joining us and have a good night.